Hello, my name's Ali. Where I live, we have lots and lots of rowan bushes, and during the winter it then means that we have waxwing birds. So I've chosen a waxwing to herald winter in my seasons. Here I have my drawing already out on the watercolour paper, but I'm going to do things in a slightly different order to the way I normally do it. However, still going to start with a background. And in my photographic reference, you can see I've got this beautiful crisp blue background, which I think really says winter. So we'll carry on with that. To put the background in, I'm going to mix up some Potter's Blue. I've got the watercolour squeezed out here ready on my palette. I'm going to make a nice big puddle of colour. Nice and strong because we want it to look really cold. Make up that nice big puddle. I'm going to put my brush to one side and I'm going to get ready a piece of kitchen roll which I'm going to scrumple up and I'm going to use as another tool in the background, and a spray bottle. Now there's lots of ways that you can get a background down. You can lay some areas of water down and then drop your colour into it. I'm going to spray the background of mine first. So little bits of water, little pockets here and there, around and about. You can't make it too wet, so that's the good news. You can make it too dry, but you can't actually make it too wet. That's going to give me enough to drop my colour into. So straight into the Potter's Blue and get it on to my background. I can afford to make this nice and strong, but I am going to paint around the bird just a little bit. Now I've got lots of things to avoid in this painting, which makes it a little bit trickier, but not impossible. Let's get around that branch and down across the wing and around that incredibly impressive tuft on the top of his head. If you haven't got enough water on your background, you can add some more straight from the pot, and you can also use that to move it too. So let's get that in. Now my kitchen roll is there if I want to make any textured patterns in the background or to just keep that water in check. Back into my palette. Let's pop some blue down here now, around the base of his tail. This is really just a background for the rest of the things that are going to go on, so you don't need to worry about it too much. Getting the colour in, using the brush to blend it out. If it goes over the top of your leaves, that's fine. It's more important that you paint between the branches rather than making them too precise. Getting that colour in and making a pattern with my kitchen roll. Let's bring that blue out to the side a little bit so that he's got something to stare off into. And actually over this side we can make it even bluer. It's such a gorgeous colour. Why wouldn't you want to put lots of it down on your surface? And then I'm going to use my kitchen roll to keep that water in check and make some fabulous cloud type shapes in the background. Now that can be drying whilst I'm thinking about some of the other things. And some of the other things are, I want to pop some wax down. This is after all a waxwing. And I'm going to use the wax in various areas on the berries and on the stem. I'm actually not going to put it on the bird. What I'm going to do is I'm going to paint some of these berries negatively. And by that, I'm going to allow them to stay white, because when I go to sprinkle my Brusho powder on in a second, what I'll actually get is it repelling that colour. You can put it over the top of watercolour, that's fine. And let's put some of it, I'm really in experimental territory now because I'm putting it on top of really wet paint. We'll see what sort of effect we get. And using it on some of the stems that are coming out here and up and on the branch that he's sitting on. They're not very big birds at all, so they can perch on very fine surfaces. That's okay. Now I want the red of these berries to really come out, and one of the best ways to do that is with Brilliant Red Brusho, but I don't necessarily want it to go completely wild, so I've got to do a little bit of masking out with some kitchen roll. I'm going to tear this into small pieces. Now because I want the berries in front of the bird, I can't put it straight over the bird, that wouldn't work. What I'm going to do is tear it up so that I've just got a few odd shapes here and there that reserve. Now, the head is definitely one that I want to keep away from the red Brusho. And let's use some of the other bits and pieces around. And I'll just be a little bit careful when I do my sprinkling. It's always very tempting with the Brusho to go crackers with it. but I'm going to be a bit more careful today. So let's keep that in check, and let's keep the tail in check too. So this seems a bit of a silly thing to do, but honestly you'll appreciate it later. So that's popping that in, and we're going to go for our brilliant red Brusho and our coffee stirrer. So here we've got a coffee stirrer, which I'm going to pop into the pot of brilliant red Brusho, and all I'm going to do is very lightly, I've only got a tiny amount on there, I'm going to tap it lightly over the surface. Now some of this watercolour will still be wet, so it will start to move. Let's put a little bit on these leaves here, and some of it will be going on to dry paper, but that's okay. It can start to spread if it wants to, and then I'm going to make it spread in a minute anyway. And what we want is those amazing rowan berries to start popping off the page. I'm going to spray it. I can take this off now, actually. There we go, look at that. Fantastically reserved. Use my spray bottle from on high, giving it a light dusting with the water, trying not to over soak it, and then straight away with my number 8 silver brush, I can go back in and I can start to make berry shapes. Now it doesn't matter if they're not matching exactly my photograph. What's more important is that you get some colour in there. So actually they're not here at all on my picture, but because that's where my Brusho is, let's pop them in there. So I can pop some over here on top of the blue, and some of them are going a bit wild. That's fine, just go with it. If you're presented with a patch where you think, I think there should be a berry there, put it in. And then here we can use that colour to make our leaf shapes. We can even start to describe the branch that it's sitting on, because it doesn't matter that that's in red. We can darken it up later. But what this does is get colour onto everything, and then we can see where we are with it. Because all we're trying to do is give the bird a little bit of a situation to be in. And here in this rowan bush, it's perched very beautifully. I really like, actually, that's created some movement up there, which I couldn't have foreseen happening, and is just a kind of artist's impression of this bush. So now I need to leave my painting to dry, and then I can see what I've got and I can put the detail in at the end. My painting's completely dry now, and I need it to be dry because I now want to work back into it with a waterproof sketching pen. And I'm going to use the sketching pen on the bird. Even though the bird is at the back of my painting, it's obviously the main focus. So I'm going to use it straight away on the eye, get that beautiful eye in, which has got a slant on it, and I can use the pen to start building up the depth of the colour in that eye. Get that in nice and quickly. I can start to describe where those black patches are. Waxwings have got such definite markings. You want to make sure that you're describing your bird in the right way. So I can pop that part of it in. It's got this incredible tuft on the back of its head. And for this project, I'm going to use the pen in between those patches of red. Now I couldn't have done this before because I didn't know where that red was going to end up. And that's one of the reasons sometimes it's a good idea to do things out of order so that you can see what you've got before you do anything else. I can put his talons are clutching hold of that branch. I can't see the other one, so I'm not going to put it in. And one other thing I'm going to do is just here and there where I think it's appropriate, I'm going to describe just a few of these berries so that they are on a similar plane to the bird itself, and I'm putting the stalks in of them too. I can use the pen to describe some of those leaves. I don't need to overly draw them because that's not our main focus. And this branch that he's sitting on. Again, this is just a sketch. This is your impression of the bird sitting on the branch. We're not looking for botanical detail. Now straight away, I'm going to switch back to my watercolour and pick up some of the colour, the quinacridone gold. Let's get that on him because he is most definitely that colour. Getting that in. And it's a little bit bright at the moment, but that's okay. We can blend that down later. I could mix it with a tiny bit of the translucent grey just to dull it down. I've just got to be slightly careful that it doesn't go green. And I've also got to be careful around this Brusho that I don't turn him too red. So there, for example, I'm going to stop with the paint. Carry on down this side. Again, I'm not overly fussy about what I paint in. I'm just trying to get colour on him. And we need to get this magnificent tuft in on his head. It's very yellow just to the right of his eye, so let's get that in. And we could put some colour down on his tail. But he still looks like a bird, even though you're not painting every last little detail. Let's get the translucent grey in, and that can then be drying. That's rather marvellous. That's bled into that and it's given me that great soft look. Can get that in and around. This brush that I'm using has got such a fine point on it that I can do all of these sections just with the very end. I'm just sort of tickling the paper really, and get that in. Blend out the edge so it fuzzes out into the yellow. Just keep it in check. And then quickly switching to my number 6 brush, I can put some of these branches in to give him a little more strength in what he's standing on. Pop this in, get it in nice and tight. There we go, that's better. And that sets him up for what he's standing on. Keeping control of it with my kitchen roll, let's put him very firmly behind this little mini branch that's coming up here. You could play about with your colour mixes with this. You could introduce other colours to it. You could spend more time than I am. I'm going to use the tip of my brush now to get some of those lovely branch shapes in. I think it's probably more of a twig than a branch, but get that shadow in there. So now hopefully you can see he's kind of poking out from in between them, and it's set him up for a nice scene. Let's get that in, put some shading on some of these leaves as well, just for a bit of interest. And getting those last little bits of detail in before we go back to him and get the detail in on him. Now, I could let him dry, but actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to carry straight on with him. And I'm going to switch to pastel pencils. So here I've got 3 chalk pastel pencils, and these are carbon black, chocolate and titanium white. 3 really useful colours if you do any kind of animal or bird portraits. They're chalky, so they blend really easily with my finger, and I can now use them to add some shading and some shadow and some definition to my bird because he looks a little bit flat at the moment. Let's start with the carbon black. And we're going to use it up and around the eye to work with the shapes that we made with the watercolour and get it in. And it's working really well over the damp surface. Sometimes you can stick to the rules too much when actually you need to break them a little bit. And I'm all for breaking the rules. Using the point to get that in the bottom. And then I can use the white in that corner to describe that little white patch. Also going to go back to my pen, which is useful for any hard lines I might need. I can see now where his eye most definitely needs to be. And I've left the highlight around, so he's got a nice beady eye. I'm pleased with that. And I can look back at my photograph at where that black patch is and start to get that in. Now a little bit of my black has gone over into the yellow. I can get rid of that really quite quickly with the white pastel pencil and bring that back. And also I can see that the yellowy orange tuft needs to be stronger. So I've got my number 2 silver brush here, and I'm back into the quinacridone gold to use the very end of it to make those amazing tuft marks over the top of his head. And I'm being very sneaky and painting over the top of that patch of white pastel that I put in, which has taken the colour really well for me. And now I've got the yellow back. Using that brush to get those tufts in, and I think I need him to be a little bit more yellow down on his cheek. But now I'm really sculpting, and this is one of my favourite parts of a painting, when you get to the good bit. It's also the most dangerous bit, I have to say, because you can do something which I like to call faffing, and you can overwork it if you're not careful. But you just got to say to yourself, I need to stop now. Let's move to a slightly bigger brush, and we can mix together some of the quinacridone gold in with the translucent grey. Now I need to be a little bit careful with this combination because that translucent grey has got quite a lot of bluey mauve in it, and I don't want to turn the quinacridone gold green, but it does need to be darker in here. You can see quite clearly on the photograph that he's a really vibrant gold in some places and a much duller version in others. So let's get that colour in. And I've also realised that I've painted his wing the gold colour, and actually it's a dark grey. So let's get that in too. Using the tip of the brush. Now he's really starting to come together now, and hopefully you can see he looks like he's sitting behind those berries and behind that tree, and he's just poking out. I've got a whole fistful of things in my hand now, but that's what tends to happen at the end of my paintings, because I'm trying to use the best tool for the job rather than just one tool for everything. Use a little bit of the white pastel pencil in there, give it a bit of a blow, and I'm actually going to switch back to my normal pencil now. I think going back to normal pencil is a vastly overlooked tool. You sort of abandon it at the beginning of a painting, never to be touched again. And I sometimes think that's a mistake because you can give some really nice shadows very effectively with just a pencil. Let's describe the bottom of that beak. And there he is, much sharper now. I think I can make his eye a little bit more beady by adding some of the translucent grey. Let's get that in. That's better. And I'm going back to my white pastel pencil to get that highlight in. There we go. Now he's starting to look like a waxwing. And I can use this pastel pencil over the top. Pastel pencil is also a fabulous thing. If you've got an area of Brusho that you don't really like, you can pop the pastel over the top, use your finger to blend it in, and it just pushes it back a little bit more. Need to do a little bit more shading down here on his tail, again with the quinacridone gold and the translucent grey. Let's get that in so it looks more like a shadow. And he has got a very bright yellow tip to his tail, but I don't really want you to be looking at the tip of his tail. I want you to be looking at his head. So let's get that shadow in, and we can make it a little bit greyer up here. And then I'm going to kind of leave him alone a little bit and just work on some of the remainder. So last but not least, I'm going to put some of those berries in so that they're a bit tighter by taking my Brusho powder, adding some water into it to make this fabulous vibrant ink. And then those berries where I put stems in them earlier, I can go back and make a bit more solid so they start to come forward. Oh, that one's obviously got wax on it, so it's repelling it wildly. I like that. And then I've got one over here. And as a person that hates even numbers, I need to put another one in over here. Can add a little bit more to those leaf shapes down here too. And I've been saying often that you need to build up the layers, and this is more evidence of it, that if you want your bird to look like it's in a really natural situation, you need to put layer over layer until you realise that some of the colour is in the background and some of the colour is in the foreground. Do you know what? I'm not going to do much more to that. A few last flourishes with the pen, because I've got a berry there which needs describing and needs attaching to something. And I've got one down here which I can add to, but I'm going to try and practice what I preach and not faff about with it too much. So there is my beautiful Dorset waxwing in the middle of winter, choosing the rowan berries for his lunch.